Hello and welcome. You're watching Race to Power. My name is Mohammed Saleh. And on the show today, Donald Trump's anti-immigration crackdown has turned its focus on farm workers in the United States of America. After earlier having relaxed his stance on illegal migrant workers working in American farms, Trump's immigration agents are now raiding farms in California for the illegal workers, resulting in a flashpoint. And in Spain, the opposition leader Alberto Núñez Feijóo has accused the sitting Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez of profiting from, and I quote him here, brothels allegedly linked to his late father-in-law. But let's, of course, start this broadcast with some breaking developments that have come in, where the American Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said that Donald Trump has been invited to China to meet with his counterpart Xi Jinping. While addressing a media briefing at the ongoing ASEAN summit in Kuala Lumpur, Rubio said that the American president is pretty keen on this visit, but both sides are working on the right date for it.
Trump's been invited to visit China. It's a visit he wants to undertake, and so we'll work on finding the right date for that, but I'm sure it'll happen because both presidents want it to happen.
Now, the latest remarks have come amidst what both the United States and China have called a positive meeting at the ASEAN talks. Amidst the looming cloud of America's retaliatory tariffs, Marco Rubio met with China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi in a first face-to-face meeting since Trump assumed power. An immigration crackdown by the ICE agents in the United States turned into a confrontation when the immigration agents conducted a raid at a farm in California. The standoff took place on Thursday when the ICE agents showed up at the state-licensed marijuana farms in California's Camarillo City. But the immigration and the customs enforcement officials were met with some angry protests. The demonstrators threw objects at the agents while authorities fired tear gas to disperse the protesters. The National Guard troops were also present at the site, accompanying the federal agents with military-grade equipment and vehicles. The latest crackdown on immigrant workers in the agricultural sector comes after days of back and forth within the Trump administration. On the 14th of June, the American president ordered ICE to halt enforcement activities on farms. On the 3rd of July, Trump said that he was willing to in fact let migrant workers stay in the country if farmers can actually, quote-unquote, vouch for them. But just days later, the Agricultural Secretary, Brooke Rollins, took a very contradictory position, saying that farm workers have no amnesty from deportation in this immigration crackdown. Now, America's agrarian sector is facing a big fallout from immigrant workers being detained. Massive raids on some California farms in June left crops unharvested. The crackdown has sparked concerns amongst farm workers and operators alike, who now fear that more enforcement activity from ICE officials could actually result in some serious consequences on American farms. An immigration crackdown also continues in other parts of California. In one such incident, medical staff at a clinic intervened when ICE agents came to arrest a Honduran immigrant worker at the clinic. Take a look at this moment that was caught on camera.
Mira, police, no sé, like taping, acá like taping aquí, like taping, no like taping, police, hey police, like taping, Like keeping. Like keeping like police. See?
Like this is a private district. This is like that.
Like keeping police. Police. Like keeping. Like keeping police.
Patience. We have everything. We have nothing. Come on.
All right, now to tell us more with respect to what is happening in the United States, we're joined on this broadcast by our correspondent Susan Tehrani, who's joining us live from New York. Susan, this of course is going to be a big issue, not just for the illegal workers who are working on American farms, but also for a number of farmers who are expecting to carry out their agricultural activities using the farm labor that currently works there. Tell us what's unfolding and what kind of an implication this is likely to have on America's agricultural sector.
Yeah, so, the use of illegal migrants for farm work or other works has really been a topic of debate for as long as we can remember, and we've been talking about it. These are jobs that, they pay under minimum wage because of the illegal status of these workers. And a lot of organizations believe that these illegal migrants are not only being exploited, but then on the other hand, you have those that are siding with the Trump administration who say that they're just here illegally. The recent incident that happened at the cannabis farm, which didn't have a license, there were 10 unaccompanied minors working under really hard conditions in a cannabis farm. And so what's happening now is most of the time the resistance comes from sanctuary cities, like here in New York, like Los Angeles, like San Francisco, where they're cities they're deemed not to cooperate with ICE. On the other hand, ICE says that they're just carrying out orders from the Trump administration and the government, and they're just doing their jobs. But nonetheless, as you mentioned, this issue is not going to go away. The immigration issue in the United States is really one that has a lot of folds. It's like really a woven carpet. There's so many aspects to it. But for the majority, for the most parts, the issue of illegal migration was something that the American people hoped that the Trump administration would go after. Now, to what extent, that's where the debate comes in. But these protests, these demonstrations, they're not going to go anywhere. Unfortunately, there was an individual at the cannabis farm just yesterday with a pistol. So the FBI is now saying that they have a $50,000 reward for anyone who can point them to the direction of the person that had a gun pointing to the ICE agents. So it's very dangerous. The laws are very murky, but nonetheless, it appears that these raids are going to be carried out and the protests are going to continue.
Right. Thank you very much, Susan, for joining us with all those updates then. All right, let's now shift our attention to the other big story that we are tracking on Race to Power, where the American President Donald Trump has announced a 35% tariff on all imports from Canada, effective from the 1st of August. In a letter to the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, Donald Trump warned that the rate could in fact increase if Canada were to retaliate. The United States is also planning on blanket tariffs of 15 to 20% on most other trading partners. A 50% tariff has already been imposed on copper imports. Trump said that countries that haven't yet received formal letters will still face new trade penalties. Now, Canada's Prime Minister issued a statement on X expressing confidence in striking a deal with the United States before the revised deadline. He also hinted at strengthening trade partnerships throughout the world. Now, other countries, including the likes of the Philippines, Malaysia and Sri Lanka, are also negotiating to try and lower the tariff blow coming in from Donald Trump.
We remain committed to continuing negotiations with the United States in good faith to pursue a bilateral comprehensive economic agreement, or, if possible, an FTA.
The financial markets responded immediately to Trump's sweeping tariff threat. The United States and the European stock futures have dipped in early Asian trading. Currency markets have also shifted, with the US dollar gaining 0.4% against the Canadian dollar. The tariff escalation reversed early gains in the Asian equities, with Japan's Nikkei closing flat and logging a 0.5% weekly loss. Now, earlier in the week, Trump extended the tariff negotiation deadline from the 9th of July till the 1st of August, offering more time for talks. However, the analysts are skeptical of a breakthrough. The Commonwealth Bank of Australia has said that it is very unlikely that the United States can finalize 10 or more trade frameworks by the new deadline. Meanwhile, copper tariffs and sweeping measures could pressure supply chains and global trade. Investors are now looking ahead to the second quarter earnings, starting with JP Morgan Chase next week, to assess the real impact of the ongoing trade war that was launched on the 2nd of April. A growing trade row between the United States and Brazil continues to make headlines this week. And this is not just about tariffs, it's also deeply political. The American President Donald Trump has imposed steep tariffs on Brazilian imports, linking them to the legal troubles of his far-right ally Jair Bolsonaro. Now, Brazil's current president, Lula da Silva, is now caught in a high-stakes political and economic standoff that could affect prices right here at home for him in the United States. The 50% tariffs that have been imposed by Donald Trump on Brazilian goods aren't just about trade. They are in fact a direct response to what Donald Trump calls a witch hunt against the former Brazilian leader Jair Bolsonaro. Now, Bolsonaro, a close Trump ally, is facing charges for allegedly plotting a coup after losing Brazil's 2022 election to President Lula. But Lula has made it pretty clear. Brazil's judicial system is independent and he has no power or desire to interfere.
Measures to be taken, and Itamaraty will take them. We can appeal to the World Trade Organization, propose international investigations, demand explanations. But the main thing is the reciprocity law, passed by Congress. And there's no doubt that first we'll try to negotiate, but if there's no negotiation, the reciprocity law will be put into practice. If he charges us 50%, we'll charge him 50%.
Well, tariffs this steep will hurt. Brazil isn't as dependent on US trade as other countries. The United States, in fact, is the recipient of just about 12% of Brazilian exports. It's worth about 1% of Brazil's GDP. In contrast, China takes more than double that. Brazil actually runs a trade deficit with the United States, meaning that it imports more from the United States than it exports to it. But American consumers could, of course, feel the pain. Brazilians are protesting Donald Trump's action against their country while also rallying behind their president. Demonstrators have been burning Trump's effigy. They're chanting slogans such as "Brazil is ours." Listen in.
Brazil does business with other countries, so just as we depend on them, they also depend on us, and perhaps even a little more. But it's time for them to understand that Brazil, Latin America, is not their backyard. We can't just be taxed and think that's okay.
Now, President Lula, facing an election next year and lagging in polls, has responded defiantly, calling Donald Trump an emperor and promising that Brazil is not going to accept American tutelage. Still, his government is now exploring ways to try and de-escalate. All right, now joining us on the broadcast, we've got Mr. Raymond E. Vickery, who's the former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Trade Development and Senior Associate at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Mr. Vickery, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on WION. I want you to weigh in, on the 50% tariffs that Donald Trump has slapped on Brazil, not for commercial reasons, it appears, but for political reasons, because he feels that Jair Bolsonaro, someone who's known as the Trump of the tropics, is being subjected to a political witch hunt. Do you think this is the path the American president should pursue?
Well, thanks very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be with WION. The world is one. And it requires for development of peace and prosperity, cooperation between nations, especially great democracies like the U.S., India, Brazil, Canada. Unfortunately, President Donald Trump's approach is exactly the opposite of that. It is a transactional, what's in it for me. And in this case, of course, it's very personal because what Bolsonaro is accused of is very similar to what happened in the United States on January 6, 2021, when President Trump tried to get a mob to come up and overturn the elections which he lost in 2020. So it's very personal for him. I think that going forward, it is necessary to keep in mind that this is not a fight between Brazil and the United States. It's actually a fight between President Trump and the World Trade Organization, the order which we've had since World War II for trade, and he's trying to change it. Now, this is an escalation in that because there is no economic component to this. This is purely political. The American courts, in the first instance, ruled that he didn't have the power to do it, and the appellate court has put that on hold while they hear briefings. So it's very doubtful that President Trump even has the legal authority to be able to go forward on this.
Right.
I think that what has to happen is that Brazil and other countries have to hold tight. You know, Wall Street has said President Trump is taco. Trump always chickens out when it comes to tariffs. So that, it seems to me, is necessary for this to go forward.
All right. Now, Brazil is one issue. Another country that's also a lot in the limelight is Canada. 35% tariffs on Canada. The United States and Canada were some of the closest allies in the world. But by doing what he's doing, is Donald Trump allowing countries like China to take the space that America earlier occupied?
Well, of course he is. You know, it used to be that the President of the United States was known as the leader of the free world. Unfortunately, this transactional, what's in it for me approach of President Trump has forfeited that title. And what has happened is that there's a vacuum, and of course China, other authoritarian nations are going to try to fill that. So it's very counterproductive. And of course, in the Canadian situation, it goes against an agreement which President Trump himself had negotiated during his first term in office in Trump point one. And so this makes no sense at all. It's not the way to run a railroad, much less an international trading system.
Indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Raymond Vickery, for joining us with that perspective there.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's now shift our attention to what is happening in Spain, where political tensions have reached a boiling point as the sitting Prime Minister, Pedro Sánchez, is facing some extraordinary personal and political attacks inside of the parliament. What's happened here is this. The opposition leader, Alberto Núñez Feijóo, has now accused Pedro Sánchez of profiting from brothels allegedly linked to his late father-in-law, a claim that has shocked even seasoned observers of Spain's often very fractious political system. In a heated exchange on the floor of the parliament, Feijóo, who is the leader of the Conservative People's Party, has accused the sitting Prime Minister of Spain of being a financial participant in the abominable business of prostitution. He referenced properties once owned by Sanchez's father-in-law, Sabiniano Gomez, which includes several saunas in Madrid. According to widespread reports, these venues were used then as meeting places for sexual encounters and may have functioned as illegal brothels. Feijóo's remarks came after Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez once again brought up his alleged past ties to a convicted drug trafficker. The Prime Minister did not directly reply to the accusation during the debate, but the moment adds fuel to a string of recent corruption scandals affecting his Socialist Workers' Party. Now, several senior PSOE officials are under investigation over claims of contract fixing and links to prostitution. Meanwhile, Pedro Sanchez's wife, Begoña Gomez, is also under judicial scrutiny. The prosecutors are investigating allegations that she used her political connections to benefit her academic and business interests. Now, adding to the embarrassment for the government is a leaked audio in which the two former party officials are casually discussing hiring prostitutes. While the Prime Minister has issued a public apology for having trusted people who did not deserve it, he has ignored opposition demands to step down. Instead, Sanchez has announced new anti-corruption reforms and has recommitted to banning prostitution in Spain. The armed fighters of the Kurdistan Workers' Party began the disarmament process in a ceremonial handover of their weapons. The fighters were seen placing their weapons in a giant cauldron, which was then set on fire. The decision to disband and to disarm followed a public call from the jailed PKK leader Abdullah Öcalan. Take a look at this report. Peru's recently passed amnesty law for military personnel has triggered widespread backlash in the country. On Thursday, the family members of the victims said that they have appealed to the judiciary to halt the implementation of the amnesty law.
This is a new test for the families, most of us already worn down and aged, but we are sure that we will continue to resist and we will continue to fight because we are not asking anyone for any favors. We are here demanding rights, and that right to justice is sustained by the memory of us, the families.
Now, Peru's Congress passed the bill on Wednesday for granting amnesty to the Peruvian military and police personnel over the age of 70 who have been either prosecuted or convicted for abuses committed during an internal armed conflict between 1980 and 2000. Now, official records reveal that close to 69,000 people were killed or disappeared during that period. Now, human rights organizations that are critical of this law say that the amnesty could wipe out 156 convictions and another 600 cases that are being prosecuted. The lawyers for the bereaved families say that they have appealed to international institutions to push back against the controversial law.
We have already taken some action at the international level. We will proceed on a case-by-case basis, requesting that this law not be applied.
Peru's President Dina Boluarte has now to sign the bill for it to become a law. Boluarte can either sign it, return it to the Congress with her comments, or let it become a law in 2 weeks without touching it. There is no clarity over the actions of the president, who has been silent on the question of the amnesty bill. Now, Argentina's Senate has approved a bill on pension reform, boosting retirement benefits. This is despite the country's own president disapproving of the move. On Thursday, the senators backed the bill with 52 votes in favor and 4 abstentions, after the lower house paved the way for the reforms. But congressional banking does not guarantee that the bill will become a law, much to the disappointment of the Argentines who are struggling with the country's economic crisis. Now, President Javier Milei has vowed to veto the bill in a move to keep reducing public spending.
I bet 100,000 to 1 that you all know what I'm going to do. You know what? We're going to veto it. And if by some chance, which I don't believe will happen, but if the veto is overturned, we will take it to court.
While one bill was being voted on, another vulnerable group was protesting outside of the Congress. Citizens with disabilities and associations backing the community urged the Senate to pass an emergency bill to secure their rights in healthcare, education and work. The groups defending the rights of citizens with disabilities have called for urgent measures to offset the impact of Javier Milei's budget cuts.
If it's not passed, we're at risk of losing our lives, literally. Because most of the people with disabilities have elderly parents. It's a risk for the person with a disability and for the parents. Economically, medicines are very expensive, but therapies are necessary for having a decent life and developing their capacities, such as occupational therapists, who help people have as much as an independent life as possible.
The Disability Emergency Bill has been promoted by Argentina's opposition coalition. The proposed legislation calls for monthly adjustments of the fees for basic services, amongst other measures. However, Javier Milei has decided to veto all reforms that are part of an assistantialist model, which the president says has already failed. And with that, that's a wrap on this edition of Race to Power. Thanks for watching.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
This Business Master Show is a show where actually a lot of professionals can actually see how others are doing it. And there are various professions and there are various professionals. There's an awesome lot to be learned, there's an awesome lot to be heard, and it's a lovely show to be on.
The stress of our world can take a toll on our physical and emotional health. Here, in New York's Catskill Mountains, lies a luxurious place of healing called WION Wellness Center. The WION Wellness Center provides 500,000 square feet of natural methods to manage diabetes, hypertension, chronic pain, obesity, depression, anxiety, and other conditions. We use the traditions of centuries-old natural science from India, yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy in personalized programs that help you take charge of your own health. A minimum 5-day stay is recommended for best results. Book now at yo1.com.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
welcome. You're watching WION World is One. My name is Mohammed Saleh, and let's start this broadcast by taking a quick look at what is making headlines at this hour.
We have to develop our indigenous technology. Mention was made here. You tell me one photograph, one imagery, which shows any Indian damage being done, even a glass plane having been thrown.
India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval hails the efficiency of the indigenously manufactured air defense systems that were used during Operation Sindoor and slams the foreign media claims on Pakistan causing damage. The American Secretary of State Marco Rubio says that President Donald Trump has been invited to meet with his Chinese counterpart